Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Sarah Leonard. I'm the Senior Partner Manager on the Partnerships team here at Blackboard, and I'm going to be serving as your moderator for today. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. You are welcome to enter any questions or comments into the chat on the right side of your screen. We're going to be addressing those throughout the presentation directly in the chat, and we'll also carve out some time at the very end to answer a couple questions out loud. If we don't get to your question, don't worry, we will be sure to follow up after the session closes. We're also offering a closed captioning feature that you're welcome to adjust the settings using the green buttons in your screen. If you want to turn those off completely, you can do that also by selecting the three dots on the top of your player and clicking hide. And with that, I'd love to go ahead and introduce today's presenter, Arie Sowers, who is the Senior Product Manager at Respondus. Arie is going to be sharing some information about Respondus's solutions for online testing and proctoring, sharing how those work inside of Blackboard Learn, and also sharing some success stories of Blackboard users using Respondus's tools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arie for today's presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to spend with us today. Since we have, a little under 30 minutes, we're going to use this time wisely to do a quick overview of our applications, share answers to some common questions we get, some of our users' perspectives, the Blackboard Learn users who are also using our applications, and so you can learn a bit about how they've been successful. Please feel free, as Sarah said, use the chat for questions. If we can't get to your questions, which we might not, there's a lot of you and only a few of us, we'll let you know how to reach Respondus afterwards. And we also offer in-depth training webinars on our website. They're free. Anyone can register. They're at least once a week, sometimes more. So that might be where you can also learn some more information. So with that, I'm going to jump in. This is our agenda. We kind of already covered it, so I'm just going to go ahead and right to the first slide. I'm going to start with LockDown Browser. That's the starting point for our exam integrity solution. LockDown Browser, for those of you who aren't familiar with it yet, is a locked browser. It's a custom browser that prevents cheating during Blackboard Learn tests. It locks down the student's device and integrates seamlessly with both Blackboard Learn Original Course View and Ultra Course View. So no matter which you're using, LockDown Browser works with both. And it supports Windows, Mac, iPad, and Chromebook, so the devices that your students are using. This is just a quick screenshot of what LockDown Browser looks like with a Blackboard test. You'll notice that when a student is using the browser, it's open full screen. There is no menu or web address field in LockDown Browser. There's no way to minimize or resize the browser window. Students can't copy the content outside of the test environment. They won't be able to visit other websites, access other applications, function and command keys, keyboard shortcuts, all those things that students could use to take quiz content, share quiz content with them outside the test environment won't be allowed. And there's no start button, system tray, dock, those things you might see on various devices that would let them switch into other files or applications. Really, all they can do is take the test. And remember, they're in Blackboard Learn when they're taking their test. So all the other features of the test itself, time limits, content, test questions, those are all the same. So it's a familiar environment for students. Now, when used alone, LockDown Browser is great in proctored test environments. So when there's a proctor, an instructor monitoring, watching the student, but by itself, it's a locked browser. It doesn't address concerns around students using external resources or who the student is. That's where Respondus Monitor comes in. So Respondus Monitor is our fully automated proctoring solution. It's available on demand. It builds on LockDown Browser, and it was designed for remote or non-proctored settings. The goal of Respondus Monitor is to provide instructors with a very powerful deterrent to cheating. So students know they're being recorded during the exam, and the instructor will be able to review that information afterwards. So what it does is it uses the student's own webcam to record them during the test, analyzes that video and exam session to provide meaningful results to instructors. And I'll show you what that all looks like. I'm going to start by the test. What does it look like as a student to take a test? Remember, as we go through this, when students are using Respondus Monitor, they're also using LockDown Browser. So they're locked into the test digitally, and they know they're being recorded. So that powerful, biggest value of Respondus Monitor is that deterrence factor. Students will be much less likely to cheat if they know the penalties for being caught are very high, and there's evidence of what they did. So this is a student view of taking a test in Blackboard Learn. This is the Ultra Course view. You'll notice that once an instructor uses LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor, it's all built right into the student's experience. So they can download the browser if they haven't done that already, that first time step, or they can go ahead and start the assessment. It would automatically launch LockDown Browser for them. And when they're required to use Respondus Monitor, they'll go through a couple of pre-exam steps as determined by the instructor to do things like make sure their webcam is working properly, show ID if that's a requirement, and so on. The webcam check is also important because this is where students have access to built-in troubleshooting and even 24/7 technical support by live chat. So instructors don't have to do the troubleshooting themselves. Students can do this in the application using help from Respondus staff or the automated tools. Go through the rest of the steps, show ID if that's something they need to do, read some additional directions. And when they're in the test itself, it's going to look just like a regular test in Blackboard. All the features and the content is the same. We're in that locked browser, and the little tiny icon in the upper right will tell the student they're being recorded, but otherwise it's out of their way. They're not looking at their own picture. There's no proctor watching them. Nobody else is reviewing this information except for the instructor. So it's a nice seamless experience, very integrated with the Blackboard test taking experience in the first place, and easy for students. So finish the test, the recording stops, and that's it. Now, what this looks like for instructors is also just as seamless. LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor integrate very deeply into the assessment tool, the tests and quizzes in Blackboard courses. So what instructors would do once an institution has integrated the Respondus applications with Blackboard is simply open that Books and Tools menu in the course, or Course Tools, I think as it's labeled in Blackboard Original Courses, and select the LockDown Browser dashboard. This is the one-stop place for all of the settings for the LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor applications, for the post-exam review of video and other results. And it's also where instructors can find, as you can see here, some resources for using these tools, including things like short video tutorials that are specific to the learning system that you're in. The settings themselves are easily applied. Little drop-down menu, turn LockDown Browser on, require Respondus Monitor, the proctoring tool, and then customize those other settings that we briefly saw earlier. After an exam, instructors use the same dashboard to review the results. So remember, Respondus Monitor records the student, processes that video, and then provides the data and video afterwards, so instructors have an easy way to determine if something went wrong, or maybe if a student did violate the exam rules. So we'd look for the class results here in the dashboard. That's going to show instructors a nice summary at the top, including a review priority scoring system, which ranks these videos high, medium, low, and helps instructors determine which exams might require deeper scrutiny. This list is a class roster and includes some other detail. Grades can be displayed here, duration of the video, and more. And instructors can even sort by all of these columns, so it's easy to hone in on a data point and decide if we need to investigate further. If we do see something out of place, simply expand an individual student's record, and you're able to watch portions of the video or the whole thing, scan thumbnails, look at flagged events. There's a milestones, timeline, and more. So really the goal of Respondus Monitor, if you remember what I said earlier, is that deterrence factor. The intent is not to have instructors watching lots of videos of students. It's to scan this. A cursory scan might be all that's needed, and then dig in on an individual student or students if necessary. The goal is that we provide meaningful results to instructors, not just a list of flagged events or whole videos that are more time-consuming to go through. And remember, having this type of technology in place, students know the test environment is fair, reduces pressure on them to cheat, and more. Now, we promised we'd talk about some of our Blackboard users using Respondus Monitor, and I wanted to highlight one institution, one of the institutions we've worked with for a long time, in fact, Southeastern Oklahoma State University. One of the keys to success for them using Respondus Monitor has really been both an institution-level commitment to academic integrity, but making that deterrence part a priority. That's their goal, is making sure that students are aware, as Christella Smith, the director of online learning, says, they don't accept cheating during online courses. And their faculty believe in Respondus Monitor and the value of it as a deterrent, in addition to it being a convenient option for students. They've been a Respondus Monitor user since 2014, and they average just under 7 proctoring sessions per course. So that's a lot. Another option I wanted to highlight just briefly here is something called Instructor Live Proctoring. This is an option that provides a lot more flexibility for institutions, especially over the past year when we did really want to watch students live instead of record and review. Instructor Live Proctoring is an option for any institution with a Respondus Monitor license. And what it does is it uses LockDown Browser still, what we saw earlier, to prevent cheating on the student's computer, but allows instructors to observe and manage students using a video conferencing system like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Blackboard Collaborate, and more. It doesn't record the video or alert instructors with flags. It's live, right? So you're watching the students, and that might mean that in some cases it's better designed for smaller classes, 20 to 25 students, because you are going to be watching them like you would in the classroom. So this is a great option for those hybrid, flexible classes. Maybe some students are in person, some students are remote, or you just don't want to you can't have students gathering physically all together. So Instructor Live Proctoring is also built into the Respondus Monitor dashboard. You may have noticed earlier, we're looking at the Respondus Monitor settings. There's a third option there called Allow Instructor Live Proctoring. What an instructor would do is require that for the exam, along with LockDown Browser, select the conferencing system they're using, and enter a start code. And that start code, different from a password, basically allows the instructor to make sure all students are present in the video conferencing system before they begin the exam, sort of like a check-in or taking attendance. Then what the student would do, once that's required, is they would simply log into the Blackboard course. When they're ready to take and start the Zoom session or whatever session it is, the video conferencing session like they might normally do, they're in the video conferencing session, the instructor might direct them to where the test is, and then they launch LockDown Browser like we saw earlier. And this would let them take the test after being provided the start code, still in the video conferencing system. The test itself is going to kind of be on top of that. So Zoom or Collaborate is running in the background. That means the instructors can see what the students are doing, but the students are just focusing on the test. Now, I want to address a couple of common questions that we get about these applications, and some of you might have been thinking these questions already. The first is about data privacy and student and security and student privacy. These are areas we take very seriously at Respondus, and it's why we put it at the foundation of our proctoring solutions, what separates us from other proctoring companies. It's worth pointing out that LockDown Browser is used by nearly 2,000 educational institutions worldwide and Respondus Monitor at more than 1,500 colleges and universities. So it's been vetted by a lot of institutions along the way. Some of the largest online programs in the world use Respondus Monitor. And in the last 12 months, there's been more than 50 million exams proctored with Respondus Monitor. Second, LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor comply with FERPA, GDPR, CCPA, all of these sort of acronyms, alphabet soup here. We have documentation we can provide for those things. If they don't mean anything to you, they do to your data privacy team, so just let us know. And LockDown Browser and Respondus Monitor, as you saw, are fully automated and integrated with Blackboard, with your learning system. So they're essentially an extension of the features in Blackboard. Only the instructor in the course or people with the right credentials can view the videos and proctoring data. Respondus does not have staff watching students or watching videos afterwards. We don't pop in on students during the exam. Again, only the instructor has access to that video and student data. And lastly, we use an approach called privacy by design. It puts privacy and security at the top of everything we do. So, for example, if a feature doesn't pass the privacy test, it doesn't go in the applications. We only gather and store the minimum data needed to achieve your goal, particularly when it comes to PII, or that personally identifiable information. And Respondus doesn't actually own the data, the college or university does. Now, one of the important points about using Respondus Monitor, just how easy and scalable it can be, is how much you can use it with a lot of students very quickly. And we saw a lot of this last year in 2020 when institutions had to do that great pivot and move a lot of things online. Colleges and universities, like the University at Buffalo, can easily roll out Respondus Monitor to hundreds of instructors and sometimes even thousands of students, even over just a few weeks. So the University of Buffalo in New York was prepared to scale last year, and they feel that two factors really led to their success when the pandemic happened. First of all, they had already migrated to Blackboard SaaS in fall of 2019, and they started their adoption of Respondus Monitor in January of 2020. So that meant they were ready to go when the unexpected happened. They had both Blackboard and Respondus Monitor at their disposal, and they feel they were at a huge advantage when they needed to transition courses online. That from Mark Woodard, who's at the Center for Educational Innovation at Buffalo. They used Respondus Monitor with more than 205,000 sessions last year, and so far, so as of early April, 84,000 this year so far. Part of what else can make universities like those successful is making use of the resources that Respondus has. First, one of the best ways to get instructors up and running, if you're new to these applications, for you to get up and running, is to join a training webinar. We run these at least once a week, sometimes more. They're free and they're on our website, so you can visit that right now and register if you'd like. We also have built-in rollout information for both instructors and license or Blackboard admins, and built-in tutorials, templates, guides, and more right in that LockDown browser dashboard, which will be in the Blackboard course. Addition, don't forget the 24/7 live chat support for students, along with built-in troubleshooting and other help tools, plus ticket-based support for instructors and administrators. So to wrap things up, Respondus Monitor helps to maintain the integrity of the exam process. It's a fully automated solution that provides flexibility. Whatever your testing scenario is, proctored exams with LockDown Browser alone, doing things over video conferencing and watching students with Instructor Live Proctoring, or that fully automated remote option in the webcam-based Respondus Monitor proctoring solution. Our tools are scalable and easy to use. As you saw, we've got institutions that rolled out incredibly quickly last spring, and they're still doing it now with getting instructors up and running quickly with our training materials, and tens of thousands sometimes of students taking exams in just a couple of weeks. Security and privacy are a top priority here. Remember that Respondus gathers and stores as little of that personal information as possible. No proctors are watching students. Respondus staff are not popping in. We're not reviewing the video. Only the instructor with the right credentials to the Blackboard course can see this information. And Respondus Monitor is really the only truly cost-effective solution for remote proctoring for an institution. We're transparent about our pricing. We won't go over it in detail here, but of course, we have information on our website about the cost for these licenses, and we offer a free 2-month unlimited use pilot to any institution who doesn't have one and wants to try them out. So with that, let's take some questions. If we don't get to your question today, like I said earlier, you can reach out to our account management team at the email here. I'm sure that our staff here has also been answering some of the questions by chat, providing you information about our training team. We're also here to help. But with that, I'll have Sarah fire some questions at me.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Arie. Awesome content. A lot of things for instructors to kind of think about and apply to their teaching experience. We did get quite a number of questions in the chat, and I know you were just talking about pricing and that people can follow up, but could you speak to a little bit about what the fee might be for students who are using these solutions?
That's a great question because I know a lot of other proctoring services, sometimes there's an option to pass costs to students. Sometimes they charge by test or by hour, and that's not really how Respondus Monitor works. So first of all, institutions license LockDown Browser. There is no fee for LockDown Browser by itself for a student. It's an institution-wide license, so it's integrated with your entire Blackboard server or servers, or multiple servers. Respondus Monitor can be licensed in a couple of different ways. Most institutions purchase a license, so they don't pass any cost to students. They pay for the use of it, and there's a couple of ways to do that that are outlined on our website. If institutions want to pass the cost to student, we do have a student purchase fee, and it's very affordable. If institutions choose to go that route, students would pay a one-time annual subscription fee of $15 for as many courses in Blackboard and as many tests as they want to take for a year. So that can be even a lot cheaper than like buying Scantrons, depending on how many tests you take. So, that's the student purchase model. But again, most institutions tend to buy a license, whether that's in tiers based on use or an unlimited sort of enterprise level license. And that information is on our website. It depends on how big the institution is and other factors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then in terms of student access to webcams, what kind of things have you seen institutions do to support that?
Yeah, so, obviously, if you're going to use a proctoring tool or ask students to be in a Zoom classroom and, session kind of thing and see each other, they need a webcam. The good news is we don't really have specific hardware requirements for the webcam. The webcam I'm using right now, I think, is 15 years old, and it works pretty well. So as long as the student has access to a webcam, whether it's built in or the kind that you plug in, the webcam check and Respondus Monitor is going to take care of that. That's where the student would do a little test to make sure the webcam's working properly. It can record them. It pops up troubleshooting steps if something immediately goes wrong. There's also ways for students to access sort of a decision tree of troubleshooting there. And we also have the live chat technical support when sometimes you can't figure out what it is. It's holding your webcam hostage. Our technical support team can help students figure that out.
Okay, that's good to know. Lots of different resources to help there. That's great. And then a little bit around the webcam piece. I guess, how does the system work with if a student has dual screens? Is that something that
Very
the tool
common
addresses?
question. Yeah, it's a
Hmm.
very common question because a lot of us have those setups, right? You might have your laptop on
Right.
your monitor screen, or so LockDown Browser detects the presence of a second screen, and it actually won't let the student use it. So if you've got that dual monitor setup, you've got to pick one because that's a potential exploit, right? To have your test on one side and a whole bunch of other resources on the other side. So that's just built into how LockDown Browser works.
Got it. That makes sense. That's good to know. You were talking about the new feature around the Instructor Live proctoring.
Mhm.
Is the initial environment check still done with that, or are teachers having to monitor, 25 different Zoom screens or collab screens, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, if by environment check, that question was really about looking at what's around a student, that would kind
Right.
of be,
Yeah.
yeah, on the instructor, because this isn't the automated proctoring tool, Respondus Monitor. That's separate and distinct.
Okay.
Instructor Live Proctoring is really a way for instructors and there was a lot of demand for this last year, instructors who, when the great pivot happened and we all had to move online, who were trying to do things exactly the way they did them in the classroom, but virtually. So we meet at the same time, we talk to each other face to face, but we're on Collaborate or Zoom or something like that. So a lot of instructors said, well, I'd really love to be able to give tests that way. I want to use LockDown Browser, but LockDown Browser by default is going to shut down video conferencing systems. You don't want a student using something like WebEx as they're taking a test. So that's
Right.
what this feature allows an instructor to do. If they want to check what's around the students, they'd have to, manage that somehow. Hey, students, before I give you the start code, show me that you're alone in the room. But that's really up to the instructor.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Let's see. There was a question around, we have LockDown Browser, but don't see any of the proctoring settings. What does that mean? How can they get that going?
Yeah, so when we were looking at those screens that kind of had the dashboard, and I know I went through those fairly quickly today, but there are basically two columns, right? A lockdown browser column and then what's called the proctoring column. If the proctoring column doesn't appear, it's one of two reasons. One, if you're at a K-12 institution, we don't actually license Respondus Monitor to K-12 institutions. It's a higher education application. But more likely, your institution might have a license of lockdown browser and they just haven't enabled Respondus Monitor yet. That might be deliberate because, we don't plan on using a proctoring tool. We need to vet this first or something, and that's okay. It might be they just didn't know they had it available. One of the things about our licensing that's good to know is if your institution, higher education institution, licenses Lockdown Browser, you actually have Respondus Monitor built in. It's the same integration component, so like a building block. There's just one for both applications. And we give every higher education institution with a Lockdown Browser license a limited number of seats of Respondus Monitor so you can try it out. So that just might mean talk to your license administrator, the person who manages the Lockdown Browser license, or maybe that's your Blackboard admin, and ask them if they can enable Respondus Monitor. Maybe there's a discussion to be had about why or why not, but it's built in already, so it just might not be turned on.
Got it. That makes sense. Good to check on that. We did see a couple questions about how your solutions work with accessibility tools such as screen readers, Braille, and other tools. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so if our staff hasn't done this yet, there's a great article on our website that explains how some assistive technologies work. We actually test for and integrate seamlessly with a lot of screen readers, for example, JAWS, NVDA, Windows Eyes, and there's a few others I'm forgetting. They just work seamlessly. You don't need to do anything to set your test up. Lockdown Browser launches with them running, and students can still use the screen reading abilities in those applications. There's a couple of other types of applications, that are more literacy tools. So you'd want to check the documentation specifically for the actual device, or sorry, application that you're looking for. But we've done full accessibility testing. We have a VPAT, if that means anything. Some institutions request that document from us. And mostly, if you keep in mind what Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor are, it's a browser with some extra features. So the content of the test itself is still in Blackboard, right? And if your test is accessible, then Lockdown Browser should be as well.
Okay, that makes sense. And there was another question I saw this come up a couple times. So if you have students, certainly in today's world where some might be in person, some might be choosing to be fully remote, can the student take the test in class using Respondus, and some take, I guess, some are face-to-face and some are online? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Yeah, so we've kind of really built a lot of flexibility into these applications. So there's a couple of options. One is there's a way to use Lockdown Browser and the Instructor Live proctoring. We talked about being able to use, Collaborate in Zoom and Teams and programs like that. That could be used with some students sitting in the room and some students in the video session. The student doesn't need to be in the video session. They just need to be in Lockdown Browser. So the instructor could give the start code, which is the way you access the test, to everybody at the same time. Some of those students might be sitting right next to you, and some might be on a big screen in the Zoom. So that's possible. And in fact, that's done quite a lot. There's also a way to use Respondus Monitor that way. There's a setting called the webcam optional setting. So an instructor can create a test, apply that setting, and students, when they're sitting down to take the test, say, I have a webcam, I'm going to be recorded. I take the test remotely. I'm at home. It's the middle of the night, whatever. If I don't have a webcam or I choose not to use one, I can go to a proctored testing center, computer lab, maybe it's the classroom with the instructor. Those students in that second group would not be recorded because they'd be sitting with a live proctor. And that proctor would let the student into the test with a password and watch them, check their ID, that kind of thing. So that's an option that's actually used quite a bit when institutions still want to offer students the on-campus testing center option. Maybe the internet access is better, maybe it's quieter than home, but they can't do it for everybody. So there's a lot of flexibility built in, and our training team is really happy to help talk about that further with anyone who'd like to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great solutions, great ideas. I just see that we're 1 minute away from time, so I think we do need to wrap up. But again, we will follow up with questions that we didn't answer post conference. But I do want to thank Arie so much for sharing your time and insight during today's session, and I also want to thank all of you for attending and engaging in the content today. Lots of great questions going back and forth. So we hope it provided you with some ideas for enhancing your course this semester and beyond. And with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
Alrighty.